video games, some bosses look hard because they are hard, but some of them have kind of deceptive appearances. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 bosses that look hard but are easy. Starting off at number 10, it's the Electrocutioner from Batman Arkham Origins. As the first of the 8 assassins sent after Batman in this game, the Electrocutioner seems to be totally boss-worthy. He's got an electricity gimmick, and he looks pretty intimidating even if he's not one of Batman's most famous villains. After sneaking through the Penguin ship looking for clues, Batman encounters this guy in a big fighting pit, and it looks like the perfect boss arena. The guy boasts and he threatens you. There's all this build-up for a big fight, and then Batman just hits him once and it's over. He is done. He is laid out. Yet the guy's basically just a big joke, and he's actually there just to show how much of a badass that Batman is. The developers put a lot of effort into making it look like a real fight is going to go down here, even giving the guy a full health bar in the corner and everything, and he just gets slammed, beat the hell up. It's pretty sad that the real challenge of this section comes after you beat the supervillain. A swarm of Penguin's goons come into the arena to fight Batman, and these guys actually put up a little bit of a fight. It's pretty sad that a generic goon can take more hits than one of the assassins hired to kill Batman, but I guess they can't all be winners. At number 9 is Alduin from Skyrim. This guy gets tons of hype throughout the game, but at the end of the day, he just does not live up to it. He's referred to as like the World Eater, the Twilight God, the first dragon. You'd think that that would mean he's basically unstoppable, right? I mean, this dragon is worshipped as a god king by an entire cult of crazies called the Dragon Cult, and the Nords consider it to be the harbinger of the apocalypse. Does that sound like something you want to mess with? When I think World Eater, I think like Galactus. But at the end of the day, this guy is just another dragon with a slightly fancier model. This isn't the case where like the boss is easy on purpose like the previous entry in the list. It's supposed to be a challenging encounter, but the developers didn't do much to make it harder. He pretty much acts like a standard dragon. You've slaughtered dozens of them by the point that you actually get to him, and he has all the same vulnerabilities, so you're used to fighting this guy. He's not challenging. He's just got more health, but not a lot. What seems like it should be an epic battle to decide the fate of the entire world feels like basically every other dragon encounter. Now, he can be a challenge if you pump up the difficulty, but if you're playing on normal or just playing on the level that you've played the whole game and are used to it, he's not gonna be that hard. Whole thing would have been a much bigger deal if this guy didn't get talked up so much for the entire game. But you saw all the names we used, like, there's almost no way something could live up to that much hype. And unsurprisingly, it doesn't. At number 8 is the Ancient Wyvern from Dark Souls 3. Here's a thing which seems really tough going in, and can actually give you a little trouble before you figure out how to deal with it. It's kind of your classic Dark Souls puzzle boss, even if you don't realize it at first. Just getting to this thing, kind of tricky. You have to get to Archdragon Peak, and the only way there is to do a specific pose at this random spot. You'll somehow be transported to this massive area that contains not just one, but 2 bosses. And I think it goes without saying that the Ancient Wyvern is the easier one. He starts out intimidating as hell. He just crashes down in front of you and breathes fire that can nearly kill you in one hit. After that, he just flies away and starts shooting fire at you from a distance. He doesn't play fair, and you gotta get to him if you want any hope of surviving. This is where the difficult part comes in. You have to make your way through a gauntlet of enemies in these ruins while the dragon attacks you if you ever expose yourself. If you know where to go, it is a cinch though. However, the first time through, you're probably going to be taking things slow, so it's a lot more difficult. Once you actually get into a good position though, the fight's over. You just fall on its head with a falling attack and you kill it instantly. And it is payback for all the potential pain it may have caused you. On the list of Souls game puzzle bosses, he's one of the easier ones, just because he plays just a little bit more fair with you than stuff like the Dragon God or the Bed of Chaos. Still, for something this big and nasty looking, being able to kill it in one hit is a surprise mercy. You don't get a lot of that in these games. At number 7 is the Destroyer from Borderlands, an infamous one. The vault has been built up the entire game as containing some kind of incredible treasure, and as you'd expect, there's not actually treasure in there, just a horrible monster that... Oh, it's dead already? Well, that was easy. That's pretty much every Borderlands player's experience with this thing. It appears out of nowhere, kills the bad guy, and ends up being the easiest boss in the game for whatever reason. They did eventually patch this guy to have more health, so it takes a little longer to take him down, but this thing is still fairly slow and doesn't pack a lot of punch. for something called the Destroyer. You'd think it would put up more of a fight. Instead, it's basically just a glorified treasure box. Shoot it, grab the rewards, get out. The original Borderlands had some weird spikes in difficulty. Sometimes things would feel too tough, sometimes they would feel too easy, and sadly this dude who's supposed to be this big bad final boss, he's definitely in the latter category. At number 6 is the Reaper/human larva in Mass Effect 2. Everything in Mass Effect 2 leads up to the final mission, the suicide mission. And it lives up to its name if you don't go prepared. You can lose a lot of characters at the collector base if you aren't careful, which makes the level leading up to the final boss way more dangerous than the final boss itself. We're specifically talking about the human Reaper. That's the shocking twist at the end of the game. All the human colonists abducted by those collectors are actually being used to build a Reaper, the big bad guys of the series, and it looks human for some reason. I don't know, a lot of people thought this twist was a little goofy, but it does make for an intimidating looking last boss. Even when you think about it, you're kind of fighting a big robo fetus or a Terminator baby. This is more of an actual fight than a lot of the other things on this list, but that doesn't really stop it from being mostly pretty easy. All you do is blast its glowing orange weak spots with a gun, preferably an armor-piercing one, and its health just evaporates. And if you got a special weapon like the nuke launcher, you can pretty much kill it in one hit. It's kind of sad that the little Saren skeleton boss from Mass Effect 1 is tougher than this gigantic guy, but yeah, that's how it is. And number 5 is Collasmos from Dragon Quest XI, which is, by the way, just an absolutely massive game. Getting to this gigantic dude, the last boss of the game, is going to take a monumental amount of effort, but the actual fight's kind of easy, as long as you know what you're doing. It's kind of a weird one because while the fight itself is easy if you do what the game tells you to do, actually doing it is kind of counterintuitive. The game tells you to use the super sword of light to weaken him, which should be simple, right? Just equip the sword and use it against him. Except it doesn't seem to work. What you actually have to do is use the sword like an item, and it will cause the aura of darkness around him to disappear. You never have to do anything else like this in the entire game, so you might think you have to fight him normally, but this guy's crazy tough if you try to fight him without weakening him. He gets multiple attacks and totally destroys you unless you come into the fight very, very prepared. I mean, it's possible, but it is extremely difficult. But if you figure out how to weaken him properly, then he's not just easy, but he's pretty easy, like very easy. His turns go way down, he doesn't do nearly as much damage, and in general, he's just not that difficult compared to many of the other bosses you fight in the game, which is weird. At number 4 is the Dormouse March Hare from Alice Madness Returns. This is a weird game, just right off. It's a twisted version of the classic Alice in Wonderland stories, which are already kind of twisted as it is, but you swap out the whimsy and you add a lot more menace, and also extremely long levels. Early in the game, you end up in the Mad Hatter's domain and come across this boss arena-looking area. The Mad Hatter gets snatched and the Dormouse and the March Hare appear piloting a giant robot. Yes, a giant robot. It looks like there's going to be a big fight, but instead a teacup falls on its head and it's immediately destroyed. It's actually kind of funny on its own, but at this point in the game you'd probably be more disappointed than amused, because as mentioned earlier, the levels in this game are super long, and it's nice to break them up with a boss fight or something. Interestingly enough, this was actually supposed to be a boss fight, at least that's what we've heard people claim, and it was cut from the game when they ran out of development time. At number 3 is Ruvik from The Evil Within. The final boss of The Evil Within looks like a pretty crazy looking monster that would be, well, interesting to fight, but instead it's one of the more annoying aspects of gaming in general back in the Xbox 360 era, the QTE boss. To even try to explain the plot of the first Evil Within seems hopeless to me, but basically there's an evil brain in a jar that you need to kill, and it's causing everyone to be stuck in this crazy nightmare world that it created. No, I know that that is not adequate. There's a lot more to it, but the final boss is the brain's ultimate projected form, and it's a crazy mess of flesh and metal that looks like it would be pretty entertaining to fight. Instead, you do a little running, you shoot it with a machine gun, then you shoot it with a rocket, and that's pretty much it right there. Yeah, it's a cool cutscene, it's impressive, but it would be nice if we actually, fought it a little between the cinematics. A lot of games had stuff back in this era, and it was pretty much universally disappointing. Like, this guy has got to be the most boss-looking boss that got the QTE treatment. What should be an epic feeling when beating the game just gives you a, oh, that's it kind of feeling, which sucks. And number 2 is the Lambent Brumac from Gears of War 2. When it comes to disappointing bosses in games, this guy's gotta be near the top, for me at least. Gears 2 is a game filled with pretty cool and challenging bosses, so for the last boss to be whatever this is, it kinda sucks, and it's a disappointing way to finish an otherwise awesome game. At the end of Gears 2, the mission is to deliver a light mass bomb into the caves underneath Jacinto to stop the invading locust swarm and flood their underground base. On your way there, you hijack this Brumac, one of the more iconic monsters in the series, and use it to battle your way to the rendezvous. The problem is the monster gets exposed to this emulsion stuff and starts going lambent, which is basically going from a mini Godzilla to a Shin Godzilla in a few seconds. Sounds like a cool last boss, like a souped up version of the classic enemy, and it gets built up a lot too. It looks like it's going to be this big boss, but instead it's this kind of painfully short and anticlimactic turret section where you shoot at it for a few seconds and then the final cutscene happens. For a series that has usually pretty good or at least challenging last bosses, this guy stands out as being the obvious worst in the series and barely counts as a boss at all. And finally, at number 1 from Quake is Shiva Nagarath. FPS games in the 90s usually had some pretty lame last bosses. We were considering putting the Spider Mastermind from Doom 1 on this list before remembering there's something even lamer and easier out there, the infamous Shiva Nagarath from the original Quake. This thing's based off the Lovecraft mythos, Outer God, which is called the All-Mother and the Black Goat with 1,000 young. If you know anything about Lovecraft stuff, you know that the mere existence of these things is supposed to drive people mad, so trying to fight one is basically impossible. So, safe to say that in Quake, not quite as terrifying as it is implied in the literature. Sure, it is pretty creepy looking, but all it does is spawn enemies and it does nothing else. How do you kill it? You just wait for this random thing to clip through it and step through a teleporter. You telefrag it and kill it instantly. That's it. That's the last boss of the game. It's infamous for a specific reason, too. In most old school FPS games, the last boss isn't that big of a deal. Like, sure, it's not great, but it's something. But this thing's so lame and easy that it's noteworthy in a genre that's pretty well known for having bad, disappointing bosses. That is how bad this one is. But what do you think? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. The best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.